Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Friday, February 6, 2026.
It is.
And if you're listening to this and feeling like the ground is shifting beneath your feet, geopolitically, technologically, maybe even literally if you follow seismic activity, you are definitely not alone.
No, not at all. We have a stack of courses today that is, frankly, monumental.
It really is.
I was going through the reports early this morning, poring over the wires, and the sheer range of human activity we have to cover is just, it's staggering.
Yeah.
We are looking at everything from the literal surface of the sun down to the bottom of the Panama Canal.
A vertical slice of reality.
That's a good way to put it.
And everything in between. We've got high-stakes nuclear diplomacy that feels like a flashback to the 1980s.
We do.
We have a massive breakthrough in fusion energy that might actually change the economic structure of the planet.
The big one.
And we have, we have a very bizarre, slightly uncomfortable scandal rocking the Winter Olympics involving ski jumpers and, I can't believe I have to say this, injections in a very sensitive area.
We will get to that. It is a strange one.
It's so strange.
But as absurd as it sounds, it actually speaks to the immense pressure of elite sports and, the physics of aerodynamics.
I can't wait to unpack that.
But yes, the mission today is to synthesize all of this. We are trying to take a chaotic news cycle and turn it into a coherent picture of the world as it stands right now.
Exactly. We want to give you that aha moment without the headache. So buckle up. We are going to start big.
Really big.
We're talking about the holy grail of clean energy.
Fusion.
There is a story out of TechCrunch today about a startup called Pacific Fusion. Now, we hear about breakthroughs in fusion every 6 months, right?
All the time.
Usually it's a tokamak reactor running for like an extra millisecond.
Exactly.
But this one feels substantially different. They've just finished some experiments at Sandia National Laboratory, and they are talking about a path to commercial fusion that's actually cheap.
That is the operative word. Cheap. Or at least economically viable, which has, always been the Achilles heel of fusion energy.
Always.
So let's back up and look at the landscape. Pacific Fusion is a relatively new player, founded in 2023, but they have already secured over $900 million in Series A funding.
Which is an aggressive amount for a Series A.
It's huge.
That's nearly $1 billion. Investors don't throw that kind of capital at a science project unless they see a path to a real product.
Precisely. And the reason for that confidence, it lies in their approach.
Okay.
Most of the time, when we picture fusion, we picture the tokamak. That's the ITER project in France.
The giant donut.
The giant donut, yeah. It costs tens of billions of dollars, uses these massive superconducting magnets that have to be cooled to near absolute zero. It's a civil engineering nightmare.
Right. It's like trying to build a star in a bottle, but the bottle costs more than the energy you ever get out of it.
That's it.
So Pacific Fusion isn't doing the donut thing.
No. They're using the Z machine.
Which, frankly, sounds like a supervillain weapon from a comic book.
It does have a certain ominous ring to it, doesn't it?
It really does.
The Z machine is actually located at Sandia National Labs in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it's the world's largest X-ray generator.
Okay, so its original purpose wasn't fusion.
No, not at all.
No.
Historically, it's been used for nuclear weapon simulations. So testing how materials behave under extreme pressure and radiation without actually, blowing up a bomb.
So how does a weapons testing machine become a power plant?
So Pacific Fusion is using a technique called pulsed magnetic fusion.
Pulsed?
Yeah, think of the tokamak as a continuous burn, like trying to keep a fire lit forever. Pulse fusion is more like an internal combustion engine. You inject fuel, you squeeze it, you burn it, you release.
Squeeze, burn, release. Like a piston in a car.
Exactly like a piston. They use the Z machine to generate these massive electrical currents that create a magnetic field.
Yeah.
That field collapses inward very violently and very, very fast. It pinches the fuel pellet. This is what's called high beta fusion.
And because they're pulsing it?
They don't need those incredibly expensive, always-on superconducting magnets.
I see.
They can build the reactor out of much cheaper standard industrial materials.
And that's the aha moment for the economics. That's the whole game. If you don't need the cryogenics and the exotic materials, the capital cost just plummets.
Correct. Their stated goal is net facility gain, which means getting more energy out of the machine than they pull from the wall plug to run it, within the next decade.
That's an aggressive timeline.
It is. And the fact that they're already building a $1 billion manufacturing campus in Albuquerque suggests they believe they have solved the physics and are moving on to the engineering.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate here for a second. The Z machine, it's designed to fire, what, once a day? Maybe.
If that...
And it creates a ton of debris. It's a violent event.
Right.
To run a power plant, you need to fire that piston, I don't know, every 10 seconds?
Yeah.
Every minute?
That is the engineering valley of death they have to cross.
Right.
The physics works. Sandy approved you can squash the fuel and get the reaction. But can you build a machine that reloads a fuel pellet, blasts it, clears the debris, and reloads again 24 hours a day for 20 years?
That's where the $900 million is going.
That is the bet.
It's a gamble, but man, if it pays off, we are talking about abundant, clean energy that doesn't rely on the weather like wind or solar. This is baseload power.
And it changes the geopolitical map completely. I mean, if you can manufacture energy anywhere you can build a factory, you don't need to fight wars over oil pipelines.
That is a beautiful thought. But speaking of the sun and energy, while we are trying to replicate the sun down here in New Mexico, the actual sun is throwing a bit of a tantrum up there.
It is, yeah. We have a major space weather warning today. The Space Weather Prediction Center reported an X8.1 flare from a sunspot region, region 4366.
Now, for you listening, if you just see solar flare and scroll past, an X8.1 is not a standard Tuesday event?
No, it is not. Solar flares are classified by letters A, B, C, M, and then X. X is the most intense class.
Right.
But it's a logarithmic scale.
Yeah.
A lot like the Richter scale for earthquakes. So an X2 is twice as intense as an X1. An X8.1 is a monster.
Oh, genuine monster.
It's one of the strongest flares of this entire solar cycle.
So we aren't just talking about, pretty auroras in the sky. What is the actual threat profile here? What's at risk?
Well, the immediate impact is on the ionosphere. This causes radio blackouts. High-frequency radio signals, which are used by aviation, maritime shipping, military communications, they can be completely degraded or just absorbed on the sunlit side of Earth.
Gone. And what about something like GPS?
That's the secondary risk. When the atmosphere gets pumped full of this energy, it expands and it changes density.
Okay.
That change in density actually bends GPS signals, which causes errors. So your precision agriculture tractor might go off course, or a drone might lose its lock.
It highlights just how fragile our high-tech world is.
It really does.
We build all this incredible infrastructure, Starlink, GPS, military comms, and we assume the space environment is just this static, empty void. It isn't.
Not at all. We are living in the atmosphere of a variable star. It's a very humbling reminder.
It is. And speaking of living in space and dealing with hostile environments, we have some fascinating updates on the Moon and Mars front.
A lot going on there.
First off, NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth were spotted flying over the Artemis II rocket.
Which is a highly symbolic moment.
It feels like it.
NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, it's a civilian agency.
Yeah.
But seeing the NASA chief and the Secretary of Defense together, inspecting the hardware that's going to send humans around the moon, it just underscores a real shift.
What's the shift?
Space isn't just about exploration anymore. It's a strategic domain. The military-civilian partnership is getting tighter and tighter.
But the story that really grabbed me today wasn't about the rocket itself. It was about the dirt on Mars. Space.com has this article that sounds like alchemy. Could a toxic chemical in Mars dirt help us build a red planet base?
This is a classic example of what engineers call in situ resource utilization, or ISRU.
Living off the land.
Basically, yeah, living off the land.
But the land is poisonous. We know Martian regolith, the soil is full of perchlorates.
Right. Perchlorates are nasty. They're toxic to humans. They mess with the thyroid, and they are everywhere on Mars. It's usually seen as this massive liability.
Yeah.
You can't grow potatoes in it like in the Martian without washing the soil first. It's a huge problem.
So how do you turn poison into a house?
You add biology.
Okay.
Scientists have discovered that if you combine that toxic perchlorate with a specific bacterium called Sporosarcina pasteurii.
Sporosarcina pasteurii. Try saying that 3 times fast.
I practiced this morning, I'm not going to lie.
I bet.
But essentially, this bacterium uses the perchlorate to fuel a reaction that bonds the loose dust and soil together. It creates a kind of biosusement.
So wait, instead of trying to ship bags of concrete from Earth to Mars, which would cost billions of dollars per ton,
Trillions, probably.
we just use the poison that's already there to build our bricks.
Exactly. You turn the environmental hazard into the construction material. It's elegant.
It's beautiful.
And it solves 2 problems. It gets the perchlorate out of the soil, so maybe you can grow plants later, and it gives you radiation-shielded habitats made from local materials.
That is incredible. It's literally turning a bug into a feature.
It really is.
Before we leave space, I want to touch on two more things. One is visual, and one is deeply human. First, Hubble.
Ah, yes, the Hubble Space Telescope. Despite its age, it is still delivering these incredible images.
What did it see now?
It spotted a galaxy called NGC 7722 in the constellation Pegasus.
And they're calling it a lenticular galaxy?
Yeah, lens-shaped. It's a hybrid. It sits right in the middle of the evolutionary chart of galaxies. It has the central bulge of an old elliptical galaxy, but it still has the disk of a spiral galaxy.
Oh.
It's about 187 million light-years away.
It's just a moment of awe, really. Even with X-class flares and toxic Mars dirt, the universe is just... it's spectacularly beautiful.
It grounds us.
It does. And speaking of grounding, the Nimoy Knight Foundation has honored someone being called Girl Spock.
Yes, this is a wonderful story. She is on a mission to be the first openly autistic woman in space.
And that's so important.
It brings up a really vital conversation about neurodiversity in high-stress environments.
We usually have the stereotype of the astronaut, right? The right stuff, the charismatic cowboy pilot.
The test pilot mold.
But on a 3-year mission to Mars, is that actually who you want?
Maybe not. In deep space, the environment is monotonous, it's high stakes, and it requires incredible attention to detail. The ability to hyper-focus, to adhere strictly to routine, to process data logically without emotional interference traits that are often associated with autism, could be superpowers in that context.
It's just rethinking what human performance even looks like. Okay, let's come back down to Earth. I want to segue into our technology and security segment, but sticking with the theme of things happening above our heads.
You're talking about the story out of France.
I am. This feels like a spy novel, but, you know, a very modern, kind of budget-friendly one.
A very picturesque place for espionage.
Right. So 2 Chinese nationals have been placed under investigation in a quiet little town in southwest France, in Gironde.
So they rent this Airbnb, and the neighbors notice something. Odd.
They didn't just bring suitcases.
No. They set up a massive 2-meter satellite dish in the yard.
Not exactly blending in with the locals, are you?
Not at all. And then the local internet starts crashing.
Ah.
This is where it gets fascinating from a security standpoint. The allegation is that they were using this dish to intercept communications from the Starlink satellite network and potentially military entities.
Just from a holiday rental.
That's the reality of modern signals intelligence.
Yeah.
You don't need a massive military base with a giant dome anymore. If you can get close enough to the ground stations or the orbital path of the satellite, and you have off-the-shelf equipment, which is becoming increasingly powerful,
Yeah.
you can siphon off data.
And it highlights a vulnerability in Starlink, doesn't it? We think of it as this secure global internet, but it's beaming data down to Earth via radio waves.
It's a broadcast.
It's a broadcast. If you have a big enough bucket, you can catch some of that rain.
Precisely. And the fact that this happened near defense and aerospace sites in France is almost certainly not a coincidence.
No way.
It shows that physical location still matters in cyber warfare. You have to be physically near the beam to catch it.
Speaking of data vulnerabilities, we have a nightmare scenario unfolding here in the United States.
Yeah, this one is bad.
A data breach at a GovTech giant called Conduit.
This is one of those stories that doesn't get the flashy headlines of a spy scandal, but it likely affects more listeners directly.
For sure?
Conduit is a back-end infrastructure provider. They handle the unglamorous stuff. Medicaid processing, toll systems, parking tickets.
And the breach has ballooned. We are talking 10 million plus Americans.
At least.
Names, social security numbers, medical records.
Stolen between October of 2024 and January of 2025. The scary part here is the aggregation of that data.
What do you mean?
Well, if hackers get your credit card, you cancel it. It's annoying, but it's solvable.
Right.
If they get your medical records and your social security number, that is your identity. That is permanent.
And it exposes the fragility of this GovTech infrastructure, doesn't it? We have outsourced massive amounts of sensitive public data to private contractors.
And those contractors become single points of failure.
Yeah.
If Conduit falls, 10 million people are exposed. It raises serious questions about how the government audits these vendors.
It's terrifying, and it segues into another kind of fragility, economic fragility. We need to talk about what I'm calling the green transition paradox.
This is the central economic tension of 2026, I think.
I think so, too. On one hand, we have President Trump, Now, historically, his administration has leaned heavily into fossil fuels. Drill, baby, drill.
Okay.
But today, he announced a $12 billion stockpile of critical minerals.
Which is a fascinating pivot. It is a tacit admission that the future is, in fact, electric.
How so?
You don't stockpile lithium, cobalt, and nickel unless you know that batteries are the linchpin of the future economy.
So is this an environmental move?
No, I don't think so. This is resource nationalism.
Okay.
He is treating lithium the same way the U.S. has always treated oil. It's a strategic asset.
Right.
He knows that China currently controls about 70% of the processing capacity for these minerals. This stockpile is a move to insulate the U.S. economy from Chinese leverage. It's a security move disguised as industrial policy.
Okay, so that's one side of it. Then flip the script. Look at Europe. We have a story from Portugal involving the Barroso mine.
Right. The European Union has designated this lithium mine as strategic. They need it for the exact same reason Trump wants his stockpile to build EVs and batteries. But green groups and local communities in Portugal are suing to stop it.
And this is the paradox. To save the planet from climate change, we need to dig up the planet. But the people who want to save the planet are trying to stop the digging.
It's the clash between global environmentalism, which wants to lower atmospheric CO2, and local environmentalism, which wants to protect the specific water table and biodiversity of a village in Portugal.
It's the not in my backyard apocalypse.
It is, and it's a massive bottleneck. If you cannot permit a mine in Europe because of environmental regulations, and you cannot buy from China because of tariffs and security risks, where did the lithium come from?
It doesn't. And the whole transition stalls. That is the friction we are seeing everywhere.
And that friction is causing geopolitical heat, which brings us perfectly to our next segment. The chessboard is moving fast today.
It really is. Let's talk about President Xi Jinping. He seems to be the busiest man on the planet this week.
He's had a full schedule.
The South China Morning Post had a great analysis. He's had back-to-back calls with President Trump and President Putin.
He is attempting a very, very difficult balancing act. He is trying to position China as the strategic stabilizer of the world.
What does that mean in practice? What's a strategic stabilizer?
Well, look at the two calls. With Putin, he is discussing strategic stability, which is, code for maintaining their energy partnerships and keeping a united front against Western pressure.
He needs the cheap Russian oil and gas.
Right. But with Trump, he is discussing trade, tariffs, and trying to prevent a total economic decoupling. He needs the American market.
So he's playing the fulcrum, the pivot point between them.
Exactly. While the U.S. and Russia are locking horns, China is trying to stand in the middle and say, we are the adult in the room, we can talk to everyone.
But that stability is fragile, especially when you look at the economic fallout in Asia. Trump just stunned South Korea with a massive tariff hike.
A 25% tariff. The South Koreans were expecting maybe 15%. They feel completely blindsided.
And this is dangerous for U.S. strategy, isn't it? South Korea is a key ally. We need them.
It is deeply counterproductive if your goal is to contain China.
Oh, so?
If you hit your allies like Seoul with punitive tariffs, you push them away. The report from Deutsche Welle mentions that South Korea is already considering closer economic ties with Beijing because of this.
So by trying to protect U.S. industry, the administration might be handing a geopolitical win to China.
That is the risk. You can't build a coalition against a rival while you're engaging in a trade war with your coalition partners. It doesn't work.
Meanwhile, the U.S. and China are fighting a proxy war over logistics in our own backyard.
The Panama Canal.
Yes. This is a story that France 24 highlighted, and it is huge. A Panamanian court just stripped a Chinese-linked company of its port contracts in the canal zone.
The canal is the choke point of the Western Hemisphere.
It is the jugular of global trade.
It is. For years, Chinese companies have been investing heavily in infrastructure there, and the U.S. has been incredibly nervous about Beijing having control over the ports at either end of the canal, the entry and exit doors.
So this court ruling is a big deal.
It's a major setback for Beijing and a significant win for Washington's influence. It thrusts Panama right back into the center of this great power rivalry.
It's like 19th century gunboat diplomacy meets 21st century legal warfare.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
And while all that maneuvering is happening, we have some movement on the nuclear front. Finally, some diplomacy.
Yes, some glimmers of hope. The U.S. and Iran have agreed to talk in Oman.
The goal being to stop Iran from getting the bomb.
That's the primary objective. And from Iran's side, of course, to get sanctions lifted. It's tentative, but dialogue is better than silence.
And at the same time,
Simultaneously, the U.S. and Russia are in Abu Dhabi negotiating an extension to the New START treaty.
which technically expired yesterday, February 5th.
Right. They are operating in a grace period. But here's the catch. China refuses to join these talks.
Why not?
Their argument is that their nuclear arsenal is still much smaller than the U.S. or Russia, so why should they limit themselves? They want to catch up first.
So we have a two-party treaty in a three-party world.
Exactly. And that is inherently unstable. You can't have strategic balance if the third biggest player isn't following the rules.
Let's shift focus to the ground war in Europe, to Ukraine. We have a grim milestone today.
We do. President Zelensky gave a stark admission. He stated officially that 55,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed since the war began.
That number, I mean, just hearing it officially is shocking, but he also used the word missing.
Yes, and in the context of high-intensity artillery warfare, missing, unfortunately, often means killed.
So the real number is higher.
It implies the real death toll is significantly higher. It's a sobering reminder that while we talk about strategy and tariffs, the human cost remains horrific.
And despite that cost, the peace talks they're deadlocked.
Completely. France 24 is reporting no progress on territory or security guarantees.
They're just dug in.
Both sides are. Ukraine cannot accept the loss of its territory. Russia will not give it up. There is no middle ground right now.
There was one small bright spot, though.
There was a prisoner swap. 157 Ukrainians for 160 Russians.
It's a small mercy for those families.
It is.
But there is friction within NATO about how to eventually end this. Finland, our newest NATO member, is raising a red flag.
This is a very nuanced but critical story. Finland's foreign minister, Elina Valtonen, was caught in a leaked cable warning the U.S. against giving Ukraine Article 5-like guarantees without full membership.
Okay, let's unpack that. Article 5 is the attack on one is an attack on all clause. It's the magic shield of NATO.
It's the whole point of NATO.
Right, so what's Finland's concern?
Finland is saying, look, there's a binary. You're either in NATO or you are out. If the U.S. starts giving NATO-like guarantees, these promises of mutual defense, without the formal treaty, it blurs the line.
It devalues the real thing.
It might dilute the value of Article 5 for the actual members.
So it creates strategic ambiguity where you want strategic clarity.
Exactly. Finland knows that ambiguity is where wars start. They want the line to be bright and red.
Let's cross the channel to the UK. There's a political storm brewing there, and it has a very dark shadow hanging over it.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes. This story just will not go away.
And frankly, it shouldn't.
So, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has had to apologize to Epstein's victims. Why?
Because of Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson.
He's a huge figure in British politics.
A titan, a key architect of New Labour. He was tipped to be the next ambassador to the U.S. But the vetting process, well, it collapsed.
He allegedly lied about his ties to Epstein.
That is the accusation from Starmer himself. The reports say Mandelson had close ties, shared political information, and even accepted payments. When asked about it during the vetting for the ambassador role, he apparently wasn't fully transparent.
And the fallout is happening fast.
Very fast. Benjamin Wegg-Prosser, who ran Mandelson's firm, Global Counsel, has already resigned.
It's a mess of ethics versus power.
It is. Mandelson is a very effective operator, but in the post-Epstein era, you cannot have that kind of baggage.
No.
It highlights how deeply Epstein infiltrated the global elite. It wasn't just a U.S. scandal, it was transatlantic.
It really damages trust in institutions. Speaking of which, let's jump back to the U.S. and look at Virginia. We have a clash between state and federal power over immigration.
This is the story about Governor Spanberger. She has signed an executive order to decouple the Virginia State Police from icy immigration and customs enforcement.
But the timing of this it's happening right after a pretty horrific crime, though.
Yes, and that is the source of the tension. An MS-13 gang member was arrested in Virginia and confessed to 5 murders.
So the critics are looking at that and saying, why are you cutting ties with ICE when we have gang members committing murders in our state?
That's the argument.
And what's Governor Spanberger's argument?
Her argument is about community trust and policing efficacy. The theory is that if local police are seen as an extension of ICE, immigrant communities, including legal ones or witnesses to crimes, won't report those crimes.
Because they're scared.
They won't talk to the police because they fear deportation. So she argues decoupling actually makes the state safer because it allows police to solve crimes without that chilling effect.
It's the classic debate. Federal enforcement versus community policing, it's a tension inherent in the U.S. federal system.
And with the current administration's hardline stance on borders, this clash between blue states and the federal government is only going to get louder.
Okay, let's take a breath. We've done the heavy lifting. Let's talk about something that might actually help people. Health and environment.
Some genuinely good news here, which is nice.
It is nice. Ladies, listen up. There is a potential alternative to the smear test.
The Pap smear. It is invasive, it is uncomfortable, and because of that, a lot of women skip it.
Big Jew.
But The Guardian is reporting on a new study that uses menstrual blood to test for HPV.
Which makes so much sense biologically. I mean, it's a sample that leaves the body naturally.
Exactly. Instead of a clinical procedure, you could potentially collect a sample at home using a modified sanitary pad or a cup.
That's a game changer.
If this proves accurate, it could revolutionize preventative health. It removes the barrier of the clinic visit. It could save thousands of lives by catching cancer earlier.
That is fantastic. And speaking of cancer, there is a new map. Not a map of the world, but a map of a gene.
The CTNNB1 gene. Scientists have mapped how mutations in this specific gene influence tumor growth.
Why does that matter? What's the practical application?
Because cancer isn't one disease, it's thousands of different genetic errors. By mapping this gene, we can move toward personalized medicine.
So not just a blunt instrument.
Right. Instead of just chemo, which bombs the whole body, you get a drug designed for your specific mutation. It's getting granular.
Granular is good. But let's zoom out to the environment and unfortunately back to conflict. There is a disturbing report from Lebanon.
Yes, Lebanon is accusing Israel of spraying concentrated herbicides over southern villages, specifically glyphosate.
That's Roundup, basically.
Yes, but in industrial concentrations. The accusation is that they are destroying farmland to create a buffer zone or to deny cover to fighters.
That's environmental warfare.
It is ecocide, destroying the land so it can't support the people. It has long-term consequences. Even if the shooting stops, the soil is compromised.
It's a very serious allegation under international law.
Very serious.
It really is. Okay, we have covered the heavy stuff. Now we have to talk about the weird stuff.
The culture and weird segment, my favorite.
The Winter Olympics 2026, Milan and Cortina. The opening ceremony happened, there was a power outage, there were protests, but the story that everyone is whispering about is the ski jumpers.
I still can't believe I'm analyzing this. It's just...
BBC and DW are both reporting it. The World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, is investigating claims that male ski jumpers are injecting their penises to enhance performance.
Okay, so I had to put my physicist hat on for this one.
Please, explain the science of this to me. I need to understand.
Ski jumping is all about aerodynamics. You are trying to become a wing.
Right.
You have the V style with the skis to create lift, but your body is also an airfoil.
Okay, that makes sense.
The allegation is that by artificially enhancing the volume of the groin area via injection, you are changing the aerodynamic profile of the center of mass.
So you're filling a gap.
You are essentially filling a gap where air might otherwise create turbulence and drag.
So they are trying to create a smoother leading edge with an injection.
Essentially. At 90 kilometers per hour, air is a fluid. If you can change the way that fluid flows over the transition from torso to legs, you might gain a meter.
And in the Olympics, a meter is gold.
The meter is everything.
It sounds insane, but it speaks to the desperation of elite sport. We've seen blood doping, steroids. Now this. It's biohacking in the weirdest possible way.
It is, and WADA now has to figure out how to test for it. It's a brave new world.
It really is. Okay, let's cleanse our palate with some art. The Louvre has some good news. Remember the heist in October?
The Empress Eugenie's crown, yes.
Right. Thieves stole 88 million euros worth of jewels, but they dropped the crown during the getaway. It was badly damaged, deformed.
I remember that.
But the Louvre announced they are going to fully restore it.
It's a survivor, 170 years old. It's nice to know that even after being dropped by a panicked thief, history can be put back together.
It is nice. And speaking of history, a sketch of a foot has been found.
Not just any foot.
A very expensive foot.
Michelangelo's foot. Well, a foot drawn by him.
Right, a sketch for the Sistine Chapel.
It was lost for centuries, just sitting in a private collection. Now it's valued at £1.5 million.
For a drawing of a foot.
It shows the genius, though. The anatomy, the tension in the muscle, it's a direct connection to the hand of a master.
Incredible. And finally, a little bit of pop culture news to wrap us up. Baldur's Gate, the massive video game hit, is becoming a TV series.
But there is a catch, a big one. The game developers aren't involved.
Which makes me nervous. Craig Mazin is doing it. He did The Last of Us, which was amazing.
It was.
But doing it without the original creators?
It's a risk. The Last of Us worked because they stuck so closely to the soul of the game. We'll see if they can capture the magic of Dungeons & Dragons without the Dungeon Masters.
We will see. And to end on a truly wholesome note, Julia Donaldson, the creator of the Gruffalo.
A staple of childhood. A legend.
She has revealed a new character. Oh, Gruffalo Granny.
That is just charming.
It is. It's nice to know that in a world of solar flares and nuclear treaties and penis injections, the Gruffalo is still just visiting his granny.
It grounds us.
It really does. So what does this all mean? We've gone from the Z machine in New Mexico to the battlefields of Ukraine. What's the thread?
You know, what strikes me is the friction we talked about. We are building the future. Literally figuring out how to build houses on Mars and create stars in a lab.
We're stockpiling minerals for an electric age.
Right. But we are being dragged down by the ghosts of the past.
Constantly.
Exactly. We are fighting over lines on a map in Europe like it's 1945. We are dealing with scandals involving powerful men exploiting vulnerable people. We are spying on each other with satellite dishes in rental houses.
It's like we have 1 foot in Star Trek and 1 foot in a gritty noir detective novel.
That is the perfect analogy. And the question for you, for the listener, is, can the technology save us, or does it just give us new ways to make the same old mistakes?
That is the question. Can we use the fusion energy to power a better world, or will we just use it to power better spy satellites?
Hopefully the former. But it requires us to be strategic stabilizers in our own lives, I think, to pay attention.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we are going to sign off. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.
Thanks for listening.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
Welcome to the debate. If you've been watching The Wires this week, you might have the distinct impression that the world is trying to hold itself together with duct tape and a few high-level phone calls. We saw President Xi Jinping in this frantic balancing act, back-to-back calls with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, trying to position China as the great stabilizer. But if you look just a few inches below that diplomatic surface, the tectonic plates are moving violently apart. We're witnessing the end of the era where globalization was synonymous with cooperation. We are entering an era of, fractured hedging.
That is a very polite way of putting it. I'd argue we're looking at a chaotic free-for-all where the old rulebook hasn't just been thrown out, it's been burned.
Perhaps. But the central question we really need to answer today is precise. Is the global economy hardening into two distinct opposing fortresses, a Western bloc versus an Eastern bloc? Or are we seeing a much messier fragmentation where traditional alliances crumble and resource independence becomes the only currency that really matters? I'm going to argue that the United States and its allies are finally engaging in a necessary, if painful, corrective alignment. The news this week, from tariffs on friends to massive mineral stockpiles, it isn't chaos. It's the sound of the West waking up and using hard economic tools to secure its survival.
And I come at it from a very different angle. I believe this so-called realignment is actually a clumsy retreat into isolationism that is actively backfiring. When you look at the alienation of key allies like South Korea, the paralysis in European mining, or the defiance rising in Latin America, I argue that this strategy isn't creating a fortress, it's creating a vacuum. And every time the West retreats into this protectionist shell, China is stepping right in, not just as a rival, but as an alternative.
Well, let's get right into the machinery of this realignment. Because the logic of my position, the logic of security first, it's clearest when you follow the money. The Trump administration just announced a $12 billion critical mineral reserve. Now, we often hear about government initiatives, but $12 billion is not a budget rounding error. This is a massive war chest. It is the West finally admitting that the future is electric and that letting China control 90% of the processing supply chain is essentially a suicide pact. We're moving from the old just-in-time efficiency model to a just-in-case security model.
$12 billion is a fantastic headline, I'll give you that. It signals intent.
But let's look at the other side of that ledger, because the strategy seems, well, schizophrenic. At the same time they announce this stockpile, the administration slaps a 25% tariff hike on South Korea. Let's be clear about who we're talking about here. South Korea is a treaty ally. They host American troops. They are a linchpin of the Pacific defense architecture. The reports coming out of Seoul this week are brutal. They were expecting a mild 15% adjustment and feel completely blindsided. When you treat your friends like economic adversaries, you don't secure your supply chain. You fracture your coalition.
I knew you'd bring up Seoul immediately. But we have to look at why that happened. This isn't just about punishing a friend or being capricious. It's about enforcement and data sovereignty. You have to look at the context of the Kupang data breach. I mean, we are talking about a significant breach at a U.S. tech firm operating heavily in South Korea, affecting millions of records. In this day and age, you simply cannot separate trade from data security. The message isn't, we don't like you. The message is, if you want access to the Western core, your cybersecurity and trade adherence must be impeccable. If an ally has vulnerabilities that expose American data, the U.S. has to prioritize its domestic security over diplomatic niceties.
Prioritizing security is fine, but the response is disproportionate, and the language matters. South Korean editorials are already using the word unfriendly to describe the United States. That is dangerous territory for a military alliance. If Seoul decides that Washington is a reliability risk, they don't just sit there and take the punishment. They hedge, they diversify. And in this market, diversifying means doing more business with Beijing, not less. You are essentially pushing one of your most critical partners right into the gravitational pull of the rival you are trying to contain.
I think you're underestimating the resilience of that alliance. But let's zoom out, because this isn't just happening in Asia. This friction is global. The corrective realignment I'm talking about means securing the physical arteries of trade, not just the digital ones. Look at the Panama Canal dispute this week. A court just stripped a Chinese-linked company of critical port contracts.
And that is exactly my point about the chaos. You might view that as securing the hemisphere, but look at the fallout. You have disrupted operations in the most critical waterway in the West. You've thrust a commercial artery right into a geopolitical rivalry. It creates uncertainty for every single shipping company on the planet.
But we have to create that friction. We cannot have a revisionist power controlling the locks and dams of the Panama Canal. It is a national security imperative for the entire Western Hemisphere. This is what I mean by the end of easy globalization. We used to think commerce was neutral. It's not. If China controls the ports in Panama, they hold a knife to the throat of Atlantic-Pacific trade. Removing that influence is messy, yes, but leaving it there is negligent.
It's messy, but it's also fueling a narrative that the West is the aggressor. And this is where we really need to look at the global South, specifically Latin America. We aren't just talking about Panama. We have reports this week of Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez explicitly pivoting the country toward what she calls a communal economy.
A communal economy? That sounds like a marketing rebrand for failed state economics to me.
It's easy to dismiss it as propaganda, but look at the mechanics. It's specifically designed to resist blockades and sanctions. They are building payment systems, trade networks, and local exchange mechanisms that exist completely outside the Western financial order. It's an immune system against the dollar. When you push too hard with economic warfare, whether it's tariffs on Korea or sanctions on Venezuela, you force these nations to build infrastructure that ignores you.
I would argue Venezuela is doing that out of desperation, not strategic brilliance. But I do take your point on the optics. However, the West is drawing a line. If you want to be part of the secure, prosperous core, you follow the rules on data, on trade, on security. If you don't, you're on the outside. And yes, being on the outside is cold.
The problem is that China is bringing blankets. While Washington draws these hard lines, Beijing is validating the other side. They are backing Cuba and Venezuela, framing their economic struggles as resistance to unjustified external interference. The more the U.S. uses the stick, tariffs, contract cancellations, the more China looks like the only one offering a shield. This isn't just about Venezuela. It's a signal to Brazil, to South Africa, to Indonesia. It says, the West will cut you off, we will keep you connected.
Let's pivot to the resource war itself, because rhetoric is cheap, but lithium is expensive. I want to go back to that $12 billion mineral reserve. This is the Mineral Security Partnership in action. The critique of the West has always been that it talks a big game about de-risking but won't spend the money to actually do it. Well, here is the money. We are securing the cobalt, the rare earths, the lithium. This is long-term strategic thinking to break the Chinese chokehold on the periodic table.
Okay, let's talk about that chokehold. You can print $12 billion tomorrow. The Treasury can do that, but you cannot print a permit to dig a hole in a European democracy. This is the fatal flaw in your argument. Look at Portugal. The European Union put the Barroso lithium mine on its absolute priority list. Essential for the green transition, essential for security. And what happened this week?
Green Group sued the commission. I saw the filing.
Exactly. A massive lawsuit claiming the sustainability evaluation was flawed. This is the paradox of the Western position. You want strategic autonomy from China, but your own democratic values, environmental protection, local community rights, judicial oversight, they block the extraction. China doesn't have local councils suing to stop a mine in Xinjiang. They just dig. So your $12 billion stockpile might just end up being a pile of cash with nothing to buy, because you can't get the minerals out of your own ground.
That is a genuine tension, I admit. Democracy is messy, it is slower, but this is where I believe the West holds the trump card. We don't just dig, we innovate. We are changing the physics of the problem. Did you see the news from Pacific Fusion this week?
I did. They're operating out of Sandia National Labs?
Right. They've completed experiments at Sandia's Z machine. For the listeners who might not be nuclear physicists, the Z machine is the largest X-ray generator in the world. It uses pulsed power to create conditions you'd find in stars. Pacific Fusion is using this infrastructure to find cheaper, more efficient ways to achieve fusion power.
Fusion is the classic always 10 years away technology. I mean, we've been hearing this since the Cold War.
Not this time. They are aiming for a net energy gain demonstration much sooner than that. My point is, the West is innovating its way out of resource scarcity. If we crack fusion or if we perfect the recycling of critical minerals, the geopolitical leverage of a lithium mine in China or a cobalt mine in Congo just evaporates. The West wins by changing the game, not by competing to see who can dig the biggest hole in the ground. Innovation is the ultimate form of resource independence.
I admire the techno-optimism, truly. But policy has to live in the present. And in the present, fusion is a dream, and the Barroso mine is stuck in court. Meanwhile, the West is hesitant where it counts. Look at the leaked diplomatic cables regarding Finland and Ukraine this week.
The ones about security guarantees?
Yes, Finland is explicitly warning the U.S. against using terms like Article 5-like guarantees for Ukraine. Why? Because they are terrified of blurring the lines. They know that if you give a sort of guarantee, you dilute the real NATO guarantee. It shows that when the risks are high, the West is hesitant to commit real resources, military or economic. You have Pacific Fusion in the lab, but you have hesitation on the front lines.
I interpret the Finland leak completely differently. It shows precision. Article 5 is sacred. It is the bedrock of Western security. Diluting it with Article 5-like guarantees for non-members actually weakens the alliance. Protecting the strict definition of the alliance is a sign of strength, not weakness. It tells our adversaries, this line is real. Do not cross it.
But does it bring people to the table? Because right now, the diplomatic table looks very fractured.
It does bring them to the table. Look at Oman. The U.S. and Iran are resuming nuclear talks. Despite all the tensions in the Middle East, despite the rhetoric, the U.S. is still the indispensable broker. Iran's Foreign Minister Arajiki called it a good beginning. That suggests that hard power, economic pressure, and clear boundaries actually bring adversaries to the table. They talk to us because they have to.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the U.S. is still the sole broker. You mention Iran, but look at the nuclear talks the U.S. isn't having. China is declining to join the New START discussions. They called them pointless. Why? Because they don't see the U.S. as the hegemon anymore. They are simply ignoring the old table where the U.S. sits at the head.
But Russia isn't ignoring it. Even in the midst of the war in Ukraine, the Kremlin is proposing extending the New START treaty provisions. They are still seeking strategic stability. Why? Because total chaos is bad for everyone, even for revisionist powers. They know the U.S. is the only other power that can guarantee nuclear safety.
Russia wants stability on its nuclear flank so it can focus on grinding down Ukraine. But look at the broader picture.
The South China Morning Post report on Xi's calls is the critical piece here. Xi is positioning China as the central figure, the one who talks to Putin, the one who talks to Trump, the one who backs Cuba.
He's trying to, certainly. It's a branding exercise.
It's more than branding, it's effective diplomacy. The balancing act isn't China trying to survive, it's China shifting the center of gravity to Beijing. If the US is busy fighting with South Korea over tariffs, fighting with environmentalists in Portugal over lithium, and fighting with Panama over contracts, China looks like the steady hand. They are telling the world, the West is volatile, we are consistent.
A steady hand that is currently facing a massive demographic crisis and a slow-motion real estate collapse. But let's stick to the geopolitical strategy. You mentioned the global South earlier. You said they are pivoting to China. But look at the Panama ruling again. That was a Panamanian court enforcing the law against a Chinese entity. That proves that legal systems in these countries can and do push back against Chinese encroachment. It's not a one-way street. The global South isn't just a pawn to be moved by Beijing. They have their own agency, and they still value the rule of law.
They do have agency. It's not a one-way street, I agree, but it is a bumpy one. And my concern, my central argument, is that the U.S. strategy of with us or against us, manifested in these tariffs and these binary choices, is forcing countries to hedge in ways that ultimately hurt Western interests. When South Korea feels blindsided, they don't just get angry. They start asking, what happens if the Americans leave? And the answer to that question usually involves picking up the phone to Beijing.
Or it means they finally get serious about their own security frameworks and fair trade practices. The fracturing we are talking about might actually be the world breaking into a functional core of rule-abiding democracies and a chaotic periphery. The U.S. is circling the wagons, stockpiling that $12 billion, securing the Panama Canal, investing in the Z machine. It's building a fortress that can withstand the chaos.
A fortress can easily become a prison if you lock all your friends out. If the U.S. fortress excludes South Korean trade, or alienates European environmentalists, or pushes Latin America into communal economies, it's going to be a very lonely fortress. You cannot lead the world if you are constantly sanctioning half of it and tariffing the other half.
We are running short on time, so let's bring this to a close. I look at the landscape, the tariffs, the lawsuits, the stalled peace talks in Ukraine, and I see the growing pains of a necessary correction. The West is waking up. The combination of the mineral reserve, the push for fusion energy, and the cleaning up of strategic infrastructure lays the groundwork for a secure future. It might ruffle feathers in Seoul or Lisbon today, but it ensures survival tomorrow.
And I see a world becoming too complex for that kind of binary thinking. When you tariff South Korea and call it enforcement, when you fight over the Panama Canal and call it security, you are revealing the cracks in your own system. The future isn't a unified Western bloc. It is a messy reality where nations hedge their bets. Cuba and Venezuela are digging in. China is stepping up as an alternative broker. The era of easy globalization is dead, but the era of Western dominance might be dying with it if we aren't careful.
Whether it is a realignment or a fragmentation, we can agree that the fight for resources, from the lithium hills of Portugal to the port controls in Panama, will define the next decade.
Absolutely. And the winner won't necessarily be the one with the biggest stockpile, but the one with the most friends left standing.
Thank you for joining us on The Debate.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.